Welcome to Active FM. I'm Nolty Lee from Decoding the Crimeverse, and today I am excited to be interviewing Linda Sage, who is a criminal psychologist. Hi, Linda. How are you?
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
I think for a long time I've had a lot of questions with relating to crime, so I'm very excited to be speaking to you today. Thank you so much for lending us just some of your time so that we can just have a chat about what we both love, crime. And I just wanted to start off by asking, where did your passion for crime begin, or your love for crime begin?
By accident, really, because I was the first person in my family to go to university.
Yes.
And my dad had these great ideas, a doctor or a solicitor. And when I went down to sign up for the course, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And talking to one of the professors, he said, go off and listen to this lecture. And you do, because that's what you're told to do.
Yeah.
And it was like, all these lights were going on, and that was psychology. I'd never even considered it, and my dad was so disappointed. He didn't speak for 3 weeks. But then, like everybody, you don't start in criminology, and when you go back how long ago it was that I started, psychology isn't as widely accepted as it is today. So I started working with the police, and I started working with victims and things like this. But I soon found that being involved, especially in violent crime, incredibly difficult. So my transparency lines were getting blurred, so it was affecting me personally. So a friend of mine was working in a prison, and she said, well, come in, because we're really short-staffed, give us a hand. And I was like, I don't think I really want to. But anyway, I went in, and wow, I just didn't come back out again, really.
Yeah.
Luckily, they always gave me the key, but yeah, so 40 years later, I was still doing the same thing.
And I wanted to ask you, just for our viewers, maybe we don't fully understand what a criminal psychologist does, can you explain the scope of your work and what it is exactly that you do?
Well, it really varies. And over the years, obviously, it has really, really changed. So we do anything from the profiling, working with the police and with victims, up to then when they're incarcerated, well, through when they, if they get caught, and then through the interviews and things like this. We can do the reports for the court, for sentencing, and then when they're in prison, you're working with them to try and unravel the things that they're doing. Wow. I only worked with A and B category prisons. I only work with the top grade of criminals. I have no work with the lower grade of criminals. So mine were mainly the serial killers, sex offenders, murderers, psychopaths.
Yes.
Normal things.
Normal things.
It could be anything. We could be working with one-to-ones. We could be working in a group, baking a cake. Baking a cake with Rose West and afternoon tea with Myra Hinley. Yeah, that was quite normal.
Yeah.
But so we can relate to them, maybe learn a lot from them. Towards other crimes. Also, then if they're coming out for parole, give evidence like that, expert witnesses. So it's very varied. There's no sort of one thing that you do.
And with parole, I want to just ask, because you've mentioned it, how do you then figure out if this person is genuinely like repentant and they changing their ways, or if it's someone that is just pretending just because they want to come out again just so they can continue?
Well, a parole is always after all the time that they've been in. So it's not like the one that you're assessing whether they are fit to stand trial. Then you might only have a few hours to do an assessment. But once they've been incarcerated, you've got all of their sentence to then make the evaluations when you come up to parole. So it's very difficult for people to pretend for
Yeah.
that amount of time. You know, the facade always drops somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
So.
And then I wanted to ask, so you've worked with sex offenders, you worked with murderers, you worked with quite a number of criminals. What is the most, I would say, horrific, or I would say the worst case you've worked on?
I always say it's the one that I'm working on at the time,
Oh,
because every crime has its victim, has its fallouts. Obviously, there's some really notorious names that you work with, and like we've just had 2 weeks of Myra Hindley and Ian Brady being back in the news because they were looking for the last child's body on the moors and things like this. So the effect of their devastation can go on decades. But every single violent crime has a huge knock-on effect. So to me, it's sort of wrong saying that one is worse than another, because for each person, that is a real landmark in their life, and for the family and for the friends around them, you know, it affects all their lives for a long time afterwards.
And then how would you say you step away from being a criminal psychologist, as in to go back into your normal life, if you can? I don't know if you understand what I'm asking.
You learn to compartmentalize, and my breakout was always broadcasting. I got involved with university radio, hospital radio from a very early age, and that to me was always my outlet. So it was something completely different. You can't think about anything else then, and I'm talking then, we used to go around and get requests in the hospitals, and then we used to go down and get the records out and line the records up. So you know, so over the years, obviously it's developed, but broadcasting basically was my fallout, and music. It's always been music.
Yeah. And then I find myself sometimes, because I do the crime show, sitting in a place and I go, that person looks like they could be a serial killer, or that is very weird tendencies. Do you find yourself doing that? And then where do you draw the line and go, okay, you need to stop and just be like, relax?
I think that comes with age and experience. When you're starting out, obviously you're keen, and you're looking for things. But the thing is, then when you're looking for things, very often you see them out of concept, or you out of context. Learning to relax with that, you tend to be able to manage it a lot better. I mean, there are things I do. I always count the amount of people or in a room, because obviously, how many people, if in a prison, if you've lost somebody, you've got a major problem. You've got to shut the whole prison down to find that one person. So I still have a tendency, I always count the number of people in the room. I always sit with my back to a wall. I never have people sitting behind me. Because it's a security thing, because if somebody's behind you, you don't know what they're doing.
That is true.
So they're sort of things, and I always know where the exits are.
I always check for the exits.
Even if I go in somewhere new, I will go and find where the exits are, and it seems bizarre, but you know, when you're working with violent people and people that, you know, and it's a very unusual atmosphere within the prison, because if you've never been in one, you don't know what it's like. It's not like, you know, they are not in our world, we're going into their world. They know far more about what's going on in that prison than we do. They have their own systems, they have their own hierarchy of prisoners and things like this, and they know what is going on in there far quicker than we do, and they were always clubbed together against an outsider. You know, no matter how well you get on with them, if it's a choice between backing you and backing them, they will always go for them. Because they've got to live with them. So yeah, I think it's it's tendencies. You always got to watch what's going on around you. You can't have vision just here, because somebody over here will do something to take your attention while something else goes on the other side. Keeping this vision, I think, as well, is part of it. This is what my daughter and my grandson hate it, because they say I can see through walls. So we're used to making sure you know what's going on around you.
And then I wanted to ask this, because I've often read that you can tell from when a child is very small. Like, for example, if they like killing animals or dead things, that they will be a murderer or a psychopath of sorts. I wanted to know from you, is this true? And if it is true, then how would you stop the child from doing that?
Oh my gosh, wouldn't it be that easy if everybody could identify that and walk around, you know, bad people walk around with horns and a tail. And the other one I really like is, you know, that every crime could be solved in 60 minutes or 90 minutes.
Yeah.
You know? That would be so wonderful. You know, there are red flags, all right? But it's like so many other things that I said about before, about taking things in context. You know, is it alert behavior? Have they seen that from older siblings? You know, is it an environment? You know, do they live on a farm and it's used, you know, they're used to seeing life and death within animals. You know? So again, it's okay saying something, but then whitewashing it right across the board doesn't really work. Yeah. So again, this is one of the things. I mean, psychology is still, it is a science, but it's also an art, because you know, it's not like, well, you've broken a bone, so your arm's broken. End of story. Set it, put it together. When we're talking about people's minds and behaviors, you know, yes, behavior is learned, because when you think about it, a baby comes in this world and basically they are not pre-programmed. Okay, we can go down the issue that things through the pregnancy and things like this, but in general speaking, it's like buying a brand new computer where there is no data on it. There's only a few base programs. That when you build it up, this is what it's learning. So if a child is learning this, you know, going back and the environment, I mean, there are things like if they've had head traumas, or if they've been involved in accidents, or things like this, that obviously can affect meningitis, you know, because if the brain's has swollen, there could be a brain injury, you know, and things. There's lots of things to look at. It's not that easy, and just saying, well, you know, if a child hurts an animal or kills an animal on purpose, something is wrong, because kids don't do that. But where have they seen it? Where have they learned it? What's the context of it? Yeah. So again, I think, you know, there are, you know, they say the bed wetting, the fire setting, and the animals. Well, you know, a lot of kids wet the beds later on in life. Yeah, I think most kids experiment at some point with fire. Yeah. Again, it's putting these together, family ties, family environment, abuse within families and things like this. Yeah. But again, you know, you can't say, because every single person that's been abused doesn't go on to be an abuser. They make that choice at some point, but then an awful lot of them have the personality tendencies of self-harming or addictive personalities or being in toxic relationships. So there is definitely, I mean, I've been around lots of decades, and all the time I've been around, there's been research from some really good universities into this, and they've still got nothing concrete. You know, if we could say, you know, like a jigsaw, A, B, C, put together makes that picture, it's not that simple. You know? There are red flags, there's markers, but picking them up and unpicking them is a lot different to putting it together and making assumptions.
Okay, so I want to speak about some crimes, and then going into some conspiracies, because I love some conspiracies. Recently Netflix released a documentary with Jeffrey Dahmer. Now,
Yeah.
I was unable to finish the documentary. Like it's so heavy and it's eerie and it's weird. I just wanted to find out from you what your thoughts are on Jeffrey Dahmer. He is currently being labeled the most evil man who has ever lived. And just on his crimes and the nature of his crimes. And I know they show his dad teaching him how to dissect animals and stuff like that. But how would, from your perspective, how would you have seen maybe a translation in how he grew up and who he became?
It's funny actually, because actually tomorrow I'm doing a guest lecture for a university,
Oh,
and
wow.
I don't know if you've heard of Dennis Nielsen, but he's our equivalent of your Jeffrey Dahmer. So
Oh,
I'm
wow.
actually doing like 6 concepts that are between the two, and they're very, very alike. There's things that are very, very similar. They were very isolated as children. They were, quite sort of the ones that the outcasts from other children. Both, the parents have very, bad relationships, basically toxic relationships.
Yeah.
Although his father had, but tried to engage him with something, because they found that he wasn't that interested in various things, but he was science and things like this. So although perhaps it's not the first thing that most parents think about developing in their child, he was a scientist as well. I think he was involved in it. And Dennis Nielsen, his first encounter at 6 years old was his grandfather had died, and his mother took him in to see his grandfather without telling him that he had died.
Oh.
So he walked in the room and saw him in the coffin. So his relationship was very strong with his grandfather. So for him, the love and the death went together. And Dahmer, in some respects, had a similar thing, that he found it very difficult to build relationships, especially with his teens and things like this. And he also knew that being gay was also another being different. But for the two of them, the isolation was their key. They wanted, they kept the bodies with them because they wanted to keep them close for a longer period of time. In different ways, obviously. But I mean, Dahmer, there's no, I know that his father supported him right the way through. Even when he was killed in prison, his father was still there, and no matter what he did, he supported him. He tried to help him through it. So although he pulled away as a child, and his mother had difficulties, mental health difficulties anyway. I mean, she went through severe depression and things when he was younger. So again, these are things that link up together, but he made choices along the way, and I think that's the key, because serial killers are less than 1% of murder, of all the murderers, but they get so much press. They will kill, usually they will kill within their own race. Dahmer and Nielsen were both different in that respect, because they cross race, which is unusual, but they went for people that they found attractive. Both of them went into the military, again looking for perhaps the tightness, the regime, the friends together and things like this within that companionship. And coming out, Dahmer didn't do very well, though. I think he did about 2 years and that was it. But he came out, and then he went on steadily from sort of different jobs and things like this, and very change relationships. He found it very difficult to maintain any type of relationship. So the isolation is definitely a key. A big, and that was one of his most motivating things, that he wanted to keep people with him. And I mean, I haven't seen the Netflix, but I don't actually have a TV. But but one of the things I think probably should have come out in that was the biggest thing was that his isolation, his loneliness. You know.
I did see a scene in the Netflix documentary where he calls his father and he says to him, "I'm lonely. There's no one here. Can I come home?" So I do see how the loneliness could have been a part of it. I also do want to ask, most of the criminals that we see have somehow had experienced in the military, or they've gone off to war or something like that. Does that sort of desensitize the soldiers? Because I do know they come home with PTSD, but to what extent does that maybe add to their criminology?
I don't think we could do such a sweeping statement. Again, quite a lot of them have been in the police force as well, because Nielsen actually went on from the army to go into the police force. And I know some of the serial killers in the States have been police officers or previously police officers and things like this. Again, I think it's looking for the companionship, the being part of something. Definitely, vets come back. There is no way that anybody in a civilian environment can understand or comprehend what they go through in a war scenario. Does it turn them into killers? But again, we have, between our two countries, we have hundreds of thousands of people that have passed through the military. How many of them have become serial killers? Minute amounts. Yes, obviously it does affect them, but I also think working in that, if you speak to police officers, if you talk to nurses and doctors, ambulance paramedics and things like this, we all desensitize. For me as well, because in a way you have to, because when you are usually dealing with somebody when it is the worst time of their life. And so you have to be in a command, you have to be centralized, because if you're not, everything else falls apart. And most people go through perhaps an accident or a major trauma once. If you are working in that service industry, then you are likely to go through that 3-4 times a day. So they all add up.
And then onto my conspiracies, haha. Because you are from England, I do want to ask this, because it's a conspiracy that has been debated for many years now. And I want to hear your take on it. So Princess Diana, right, was said to have been killed either by the MI6 or by the royal family. And the people who say it was the royal family say it's either he's now King Philip was involved, or the Queen was involved, or it was the MI6. What is your take on that?
I honestly can't see this. I think, unfortunately, the royal family separated Camilla and Charles. They were together when they were at university and wanted to be married. And the family were against it. They sent him away, and the Queen mother, so King Charles's grandmother, and Montgomery actually made her marry Parker Bowles because they did not think she was suitable for him. So they had intervened in a very early age, and basically this is a very romantic story when you take all the horrific other part away from it. But Princess Diana, she was very far removed from Charles. He was not brought up to be at ease with commoners. He wasn't brought up to show his affection and things like this, because that's not what the royals did. So I think he got a lot of bad press
Yeah.
in the way that he didn't show emotion how everybody else thought. But then if you saw the king or the queen, you know, in floods of tears, would it be the right aspect either? So I think they were a little bit doomed, whether they did or they didn't. I don't think that. I think there is more to the story.
Yeah.
Will we ever know? Yeah, I do think they were wrong in blaming the driver, because obviously it came out that his alcohol, he wasn't drunk. So I think for his family, that must have been a really bad ordeal to have to live through. But so much goes on that we don't know the background of. I don't think the royal family are assassins, basically. I don't think, you know, they've got guys out and killing people. Had she made some wise choices? Maybe not. But then we all make mistakes. So, you know, I think there is definitely more to the story, but whether we'll ever find out, who knows. But I don't think the royal family were involved in an assassination in that respect.
Yeah. And then I wanted to ask you, so you work in jails and with criminals all the time, and there's corporate punishment, where they do put some people to death. I don't know if I'm mistaken. I think it's still happening in America to some extent. And I wanted to know your take on corporate punishment.
Obviously here, well, in Britain, we don't have the death penalty anymore. That went out in 65. And there's been a lot of people saying that it should be brought back. We had hanging. We didn't have the electric chair or the injection like they do in the States, and it's not in all of the states of America. It's in some. So, you know, do I think that it should be there? I think there's, you know, it's supposed to be there as a deterrent. I don't like the fact that in America they can be on death row for 20, 30 years. To me, what is the point of that? You know, if they have got a death sentence, then it should be quite quick. There shouldn't be the to-ing and fro-ing for years or decades. But yes, I think there is a situation for it. But now we have a lot better forensics, you know, DNA, because people always throw up, oh, people have died that, you know, were innocent. Yeah, but there's also people that have been innocent that have got off with things as well. So, yeah, is it a deterrent? Well, you know, in the states where they still have the death penalty, they still have murderers. They still have people doing things that warrant the death penalty. So it's not always a deterrent, but I do think that, you know, there are some things that it could be in situ for. Yeah.
And then I want to ask, is there anything interesting you're working on, or anything interesting in the world of crime that maybe not a lot of people are putting focus or attention on right now?
Well, we'll have a new book coming out. So Talking to Killers, that's underway at the moment. It's actually with the editor, so that takes longer than writing, actually. But yeah, so that will be coming out soon, and I'm doing quite a few talks on different things about serial killers and psychopaths. And the next one that I'm working on is profiling. So I'm going to do a session on profiling and the misuse of profiling as well, because I mean, there are people that have been, you know, put into the mold because it fits the profile rather than following the evidence. So it does work both ways. But I think, you know, people now, the media particularly, hype up bad personality traits. Yeah. And a lot of women, particularly because these traits are still more masculine than feminine, and a lot of women think that they have oh, I can change them, they're misunderstood people.
Yeah.
Well, if they've got that narcissistic personality trait, then you are not going to change them.
Oh, wow.
They don't want to change. So until somebody wants to change, no matter what you do.
Yeah.
So if a relationship doesn't value you, then it's not worth being in.
Very, very lovely advice. I think we all need to keep that in mind. And I'll definitely be looking out for your book. Everybody, please look out for that book. We always want to get into the minds of killers, and you are doing that in a book. So we definitely are going to be looking out for the book and for your talks as well, so that we can just hear more from you. But thank you so much for taking out the time to speak to us. It really has been lovely speaking to you and just hearing your wisdom and knowledge. And there's a lot of things that I'm thinking differently about now as well from what you've said. So thank you so much for taking time out to speak to us.
My pleasure. I really enjoyed being with you, and thank you for the invitation.
All right. But from now until next time, this is Naldili, and we are signing out. Peace.